Welcome to Forum 360 on Akron Community Television and Rubber City radio stations. I'm Leslie Ungar, your host today. I'm fortunate that every couple of years I get to fulfill a dream right here on TV and radio. And you're fortunate because you get to listen to an incredible perspective on basketball and life. Listen and watch a man with more persistence and resilience than most 10 or 100 people you will meet. The accolades have grown for the men's basketball program at the University of Akron under Coach Keith Dambrot. Players named to the All-MAC first team, second team, players who have played for years now the professional basketball route in Europe. The UA Athletics Department has also increased its national exposure under Coach Keith Dambrot. During his tenure, Akron has played in a number of nationally televised games and has been recognized by numerous national publications. Long before I met him, I felt like I knew him, and you may also. Many of us have heard and read about Keith Dambrot since his days playing baseball at the University of Akron. Stay with us as we truly get the benefit of a wise soul as we look at Zip basketball, the playoffs, and of course, LeBron. Welcome.
Thank you.
As a communication coach, I preach to begin at the end. So let's begin with the last game. Can you talk to us about those minutes while that 18-point lead was slipping away?
Yeah, a little bit. I think if you've been around sports as long as I have, you understand that each game in and of itself has different peaks and valleys. Mm-hmm. And you have to weather storms. And we did a good job of weathering the first storm. We took the first punch, we punched back, and then we had some things go against us, and we didn't do a very good job with the second and third punch. So when you get the second punch, you have to be able to make free throws. You've got to be able to make a play or two. And about everything that went wrong. But it's not an uncommon occurrence. We've been down that road before. We just didn't do a very good job with it.
Now, sometimes, regardless of the sport, it seems like momentum is like an invisible player, and sometimes it goes and switches to the other bench, and you don't even see it happen, but it still happens, even though it's an intangible. How do you get or keep momentum?
Well, I feel like you build that in practice, and you have to deal with adversity and prosperity. So we probably did a pretty good job with the prosperity part, and then we kind of lost it. And then the adversity part, we really didn't do a very good job with. We handled it once, we handled it twice, but the third and fourth time we didn't handle it very well. So if you don't do it consistently in practice, if you're not consistent, I would call us consistently inconsistent this year, and it came back to bite us.
Now, is it harder for you and players to live with the success, or is it harder to live with failure?
I think both are difficult. I think success causes other situations and other conflicts that you have to deal with, and failure causes other things. So you have to be able to deal with both of those issues. And some people are very good at handling success and not very good at handling adversity, and vice versa for other people.
Now, one thing I've always missed is not being able to be in a locker room at a halftime or after a big win or a heartbreaking loss. I would love to hear what a coach says. Can you share with us a few things that you would have said to the team after watching that loss slip away and then go into the locker room? What are some things that you would say to them?
Well, I can't remember specifically, but typically I would talk to them about, how the game slipped away. And a lot of times, like, before I really get into details, I'll watch the tape. So a lot of times after the game, I'm a little bit more narrow as to what I say, and I don't like to say a lot of things after the game because you're emotionally in a different place. So you're better off sometimes just to wait. But this one, we talked about Quincy Diggs being a senior and what he had done for the program. We talked about what we had to do to get better for next season because, like I told you, it was really just a symptom of our overall problem this year. We were very inconsistent compared to most of our teams. talented but inconsistent.
So, I say that there's always, in communication, there's always a consequence for what you do or don't do. And so kind of, it sounds like you're saying that there was a consequence for that inconsistency. There was a consequence, and you finally had to pay it at that bad moment.
Well, yeah, I think we didn't shoot free throws very well all season, and we didn't shoot free throws very well in that game. We played very well at times all season, and then at other times we had a hard time. We played without a point guard most of the season, which is very, very difficult to be consistent when you're playing with basically a great body but not a great head all the time. So I think that kind of reared itself in that particular game, and we got caught.
I imagine every team has a little bit of a different culture and a little bit of a different kind of MO. If you had to take 3 words to describe this team, what would it be?
Athletic, competitive, and inconsistent. I think those are the 3 best words to describe them.
We hear a lot now, we're into March Madness, and we hear a lot that the playoff season is different than the regular season. Can you tell us, as a coach, is that true? Is a playoff season different for the team than the regular season, which then means when they meet the same team that they might have met in a regular season, is it really different in the playoffs?
I don't think so for the good teams, because the good teams, anything they do is a competitive experience for them, whether they're throwing darts or they're playing bocce ball or shooting free throws or playing one-on-one. They're going to compete to the fullest. For some teams, they can ratchet up a little bit in the postseason because they haven't done that all year long. But the really good teams, the really good players, they play every single day, every single play. And I would say that's the difference between the great and the good and the average.
Can you tell us, what does a conversation sound like when you have to take a starting player, and whether it's their play or that is perhaps not as good, or some other players whose play is ramped up and is better, you have to tell a starting player that they're now going to have to sit on the bench? What might that sound like?
Well, there's different reasons why people start or don't start. For instance, sometimes you may take somebody that's playing really well and bring them off the bench for the good of the team. And other times it may be that somebody else is playing better than that particular person. But that's part of team building, chemistry, understanding how to win. And most of it nowadays is, if you have reasonably good talent, is managing people. And I think that's the key. A lot of times I'll take somebody out after they have a good game. Just from the psychological perspective, is that some people don't handle adversity very well. So you want to try to build them up before you make a change.
So you might take someone out after a good game, not just, say, a bad game, but you may want them to rest on the good game.
Right, because psychologically, some people handle those things better than others. There's some guys that will wilt on you and never recover from that adversity, and there's other guys that can handle that. So those people that wilt, a lot of times you'll build them up and then make your change.
Well, let me ask you, and I might be misquoting him, but Michael Jordan once said that basketball was mainly played between the ears. So how much of coaching is that strategy that has less to do with basketball and more to do with people?
More than you would think. And I think the higher the level, the more it becomes managing people. If you're coaching in the NBA with those kind of talents, you have to make sure that the best players are behind you, that the best players understand what you're trying to accomplish.
But let me ask you, is best just basketball skills? Or when you say best, is that basketball skills plus something else?
Well, that's a complex question. So basketball skills include a lot of different things. That includes the ability to dribble, pass, and shoot. That includes the ability to defend. That includes the ability to lead. And that includes the ability to handle good and bad situations again. So when you build a team, you have to have all those ingredients involved. And if you don't have good chemistry, talent alone is not good enough to win.
Well, let me ask you, I once had a CEO that said to me, and it surprised me, and I think that's probably why I've always remembered it, that even though he was CEO of a very large, successful company for 24 years, he did a lot more following than he did leading. So do your players need to learn to lead and to follow, or are certain ones asked to lead and others to follow?
I think, Leslie, really each person's different. And I don't think you can make a follower into a leader. I think there's some innate born qualities that leaders have. Now, it may be hidden, it might be undiscovered, but you have to develop it. But certain guys can never lead.
We are listening today to Keith Dambrot, head basketball coach at the University of Akron men's basketball program. We're talking about basketball and life. Do players learn more lessons from a win or a loss?
Well, I would like to think that they learn more from a win than a loss. And at least that's what I really want. I think, again, when you have success, you have to evaluate yourself objectively, because you may think you're playing well, but in reality, you may be playing poorly. And so what we try to do is make sure that we really are objective with ourselves. When you lose, that's not a good thing for us, because when we lose, we get fired. So you can still learn things, but I would much rather learn from the win than the loss.
Now, in the Trussell-Dennison coaching class that was offered this past fall, in which I was a student, you were the first guest coach that was a speaker, and you talked about the attributes of a great leader. Do you remember a couple of those that you can share with us?
Yeah, I remember some. I have them written down for a particular reason. As you get older, you forget some. But I will say that, one, you have to be confident in your own skin. You have to believe in the things that you believe in, and you have to stick with that. You have to be willing to be flexible. You have to be able to make adjustments. You have to be tough when you need to be tough, but you need to learn to massage when you need to be massaged.
Now, when you say flexible, when you look back to your starting days as a coach, do you kind of chuckle and think you're so much more flexible than you ever thought you would be when you started out, or did you always know that flexible was an attribute?
I think I was fairly flexible, but I think things have changed. I started coaching over 30 years ago. So kids are different now, upbringings are different, so you have to be even more on top of it than ever. So what I try to do is I try to teach with compassion and passion. I think you have to do that, because a lot of these young people haven't had the same things that we had growing up, and I think that's how I try to coach.
Now, you also talked about the difference in coaching good players and great players, which I found really fascinating. Would you talk a little bit about the difference between coaching good players and great players?
A lot of coaches can take average players and make them very, very good, but not really coach great players because they're so inflexible. So there's some guys
because the coach is so inflexible.
Because the coach is so inflexible.
Okay.
So, for instance, let me use LeBron as an example. I really don't care what foot LeBron pivots on as long as he doesn't travel. I don't want his head thinking about inconsequential things. I want him thinking about the important things. So if he has an issue, then I'm going to coach him on that issue. But if he doesn't have an issue, I'm going to stay out of his way. And some coaches can't get that part of it.
Now, does that cause any problems with other players? Do they say, you didn't blow the whistle on him when he did that, but you blew the whistle on me when I did that? Or do they understand that you're in greatness?
Well, you have to coach. You have to coach that also. What we tell our guys all the time is that everybody's going to be treated fairly, but everybody's going to be treated differently, because each person is a different personality. And so what works for one guy may not work for another person. So
fairly but differently.
Fairly but differently.
Okay. One of the many times that Campy Russell was here from the Cavs, he said that how much better the Cavs got that particular year would depend on how curious the players were about how much better they could be. Do you think does that apply at college, or is that something more for the pros? Do your players need or want to know how much better they can be?
I think guys are pretty smart nowadays. They know if they have a good team or they're a good player. They also know what their weaknesses are. They don't always face those weaknesses, but they know. So I think whenever somebody thinks they have a chance to be very, very good, they tend to work a little bit harder than when they think they're not very good. So I'd say that would be what he's talking about as far as curious.
Now, is it your role to be that honest mirror with the things that they're not as good at, or do you see your role more to grow the things that they're already good at?
You have to fine-tune the things that you're really good at, and then you have to stay away during the game on the things that you're not very good at, but continue to work on those things so that it becomes a strength. And so that's what development of a player is. That's what coaching and developing players is figuring out what they are, working on their weaknesses, and fine-tuning their strengths.
What are some similarities between coaching at college and coaching in the NBA, and what would you guess are some dissimilarities between coaching?
I've never coached in the NBA. I've been at some free agent camps, but I think the better the players, the more you're managing personalities. The worse the players, the more you're managing the X's and O's. So in addition, you're playing 81 games in professional basketball in the regular season, so you have to let those losses kind of fall off your back a little bit quicker than you do in college and move on to the next.
Not be looking backwards.
Exactly. The expression is next play. And so it would be next game in the professional ranks. So there's certainly differences. I believe that a great coach at any level, whether it's high school or college, with reasonably good intelligence could make that adjustment. I think the rap's been that the college coaches haven't been able to do well in the pros, but most of the time that is because they haven't had good jobs in the pros.
Now, would that apply to all sports? So should Browns fans be excited? Would that apply to all sports, that if they were pretty good, they should be pretty good?
I think in the NFL, the college coaches have proven that they can coach in the NFL. In the NBA, again, a lot of the college coaches haven't gotten the best jobs, so they haven't yet proven that they can coach.
So it's not fair to compare. But let me ask you, and this might have changed in the 30 years that you've been coaching. When we look at the NBA, it seems like not all, but most of the successful coaches are former players, and that's kind of changed over the last few years. Do you see that do your players need for you to have played at that level to listen to you, or is that not important?
That's an interesting question. I think the key in the NBA is that you have to have credibility. So look at Greg Popovich. I don't think he played in the NBA, but he has such high credibility at this point because of all the games he's won. And there's very few coaches in that league that have that high credibility. Even the guys that have played, they have to earn their stripes as a coach before the players will respect them. So guys that have had problems in the NBA because you have to have that credibility.
Now, do your guys, because you at the college level, and again even more so at the NBA, but I imagine that most of your players tower over you, or some of your players tower over you.
All of them.
All of them. Okay. So is it hard at any time to be telling them what to do when they know that physically they have different gifts than you had? So is that hard, or is the coach still the coach? Even today, with the different players and the different everything, is the coach still the coach?
It's an interesting question. Again, if you look in the NBA, the great players haven't been great coaches in that league. So I think, again, guys are smart enough. LeBron, for instance, again, they're smart enough to know who's really a good coach and who isn't a good coach. And again, the other thing you fight is accountability. So it's easy for a player to blame the coach rather than hold themselves accountable.
And it's easier to replace one coach. Right?
Right. So for instance, if Kobe Bryant doesn't like you, you're gone. Or if LeBron James doesn't like you, you're not going to coach. Now, and then the other players, they're on a little bit different situation because if they're a marginal player, they're going to go rather than the coach.
Now, yes, that's kind of fun to watch as the spectator sometimes to see who's going to win.
Fun for you, but if you were a coach, you wouldn't be so happy.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, since you brought up LeBron, let me ask you, of his accomplishments on and off the court, what, as someone that has known him for so much of his life, what are you most proud of?
Well, let's start with the basketball part. I think his ability to rally himself after his first failure in Miami, I think that's the thing that I'm most proud of. Again, there's a lot of people that when things are going well can be successful, but there's very few people when things go poorly that can rally themselves and their team and fix the problems that they had. And he did an unbelievable job of doing that. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that he gives back to Akron. He does a lot for the people that have been good to him. So he has a loyalty, trust, and commitment level that I think is beyond reproach as far as the people that have been around him.
In 2007, the then UA Director of Athletics, Mac Rhodes, said about your then 7-year agreement that Keith holds a special place in the hearts and minds of the people in this region, and we know this is where he wants to remain. Why do you think that you hold a special place in the hearts and minds of the people in this region?
Well, simply, I'm a guy that's from here. My mother was a professor at Akron. I went to school at Akron. My kids go to Akron. So I built up equity from the perspective that I put my money where my mouth is, and we believe in the university and the community. I think when one of your own is coaching and grew up in this community and then went to school there, it's much easier to root for them than an outsider coming in.
Just a couple more questions in the time that we have. It's gone by so fast, but when you go to a game that one of your kids are playing, what kind of a bleacher dad are you?
Well, my kids are older now. My son's a freshman soccer player at the university, so I'm probably not as good as you would think. You know, the one thing I do realize is when parents go to games, they really don't watch the game. They watch their own children. They don't really care about the outcome of the game. They really care about their own, which, you know, I have to check myself from time to time also.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a couple names, and I'm going to ask you for just one word per player, okay? Demetrius Treadwell.
Relentless.
Kawan Cheatham.
Talented.
Niles Evans.
Shooter.
Carmelo Betancourt.
Quick. Aaron
Jackson.
Young.
Nick Harney.
Talented but inconsistent. That's 3 words.
BJ Gladden.
Very talented.
And I'm afraid I won't pronounce his name correctly. DG
Battalion.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. And
the word I'm looking for is resilient.
Resilient. Well, that's funny because that's a word that we use for you. I'm fortunate that once a year I get to fulfill a dream right here on TV and radio. And you're fortunate because you get to listen to a man with more persistence and resilience than most people you will meet. The accolades continue to grow for the men's basketball program under Keith Dambrot at the University of Akron. Now you may know a little more as to why he has a place in the hearts and minds of Northeast Ohio. Keith Dambrot and the men's basketball team at the University of Akron, 2 pieces of the fabric that make Northeast Ohio great. I'm Leslie Ungar. Thank you for joining us on Forum 360, co-sponsored by the Shaw Jewish Community Center.
This program brought to you with support from the Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron and AkronBuzz.com.